Good evening, everyone. Happy Thursday. I hope everybody has had an amazing day today. Welcome to the town hall sponsored by the Action for Justice Collective. Listen, y'all know how we've been doing, come together on the fourth Thursday of every month to talk about topics that impact Black and Brown communities. We want to make a difference in our communities. We want people to be informed and have all the information about the major topics that impact us the most. And so we are here tonight ready to dive into another conversation. And so just in case this is your first time on here, I just want to say welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight for this town hall conversation. Listen, we want y'all to stretch your fingers out, get ready to type and communicate and engage with us throughout our broadcast tonight. So somebody may be asking, well, what is the Action for Justice Collective? And the mission statement for the Action for Justice Collective is that we are a collective of business and community leaders who work to influence and enhance political, economic, and the justice system to bring change.
We will be with you momentarily. Stay on, hang on. We're coming through.
All right. I'm back. We're having some technical difficulties. I don't know how much you heard, but tonight we're going to jump into a conversation tonight, and tonight is going to be a very serious conversation. Just want to let you guys know, just in case there's a trigger warning for you guys, that we're going to be talking about gun violence, and we're going to be talking about gun violence and the impact on our city. Just in case you didn't hear me introduce myself, my name is Precious Minds, and I will be facilitating and moderating the conversation tonight. We have some guests who have been directly impacted by gun violence. They've had some experiences that they're going to share tonight. We have some therapists that are on the line that are going to share and help us to deal with the trauma and understand what is PTSD. How do we get through dealing with the impact of gun violence? How do we deal with the fear that comes along with gun violence? And then we have a young person on with us tonight that's really going to give us like word from the street. Like, what does it look like from a young person's perspective, what they are experiencing in our city every single day? I'm ready for this conversation. I hope you are too. I said it before the technology started acting crazy. Make sure you are chatting with us in the comments, that you are engaging with us. If you have questions, please feel free to ask those questions. And we're going to do our best to get answers for you and to engage you tonight. So let's listen. Let's jump into it. And before we do, I just want to let you guys know that this show is done in partnership with the Soul Transformation and the Ladipo Group. We're always so grateful for our sponsors and those who give up their time to work with us and bring their expertise to the table. So thank you so much. So we're going to start this conversation out tonight with two people who have experienced gun violence firsthand. They may not have been the victim of gun violence, but they may have had a family member who was the victim of gun violence. So we're going to bring them on. They're going to share a little bit of their story. Then we're going to ask a few questions. So we have Jackie Williams joining us and Martin Boyd. Jackie Williams is the mother and Martin is the grandfather of a gun violence victim. So they're going to come on. They're going to share their stories with us. And while they're doing that, what I'm going to ask you to do is just hit the share button. Hit the share button for, somebody needs to hear this conversation tonight. You may know somebody who has been the victim of violence, and they need to hear this conversation. So do me a favor and hit the share button and share this conversation. All right, I think we have our guest in the studio with me. So I'm going to first of all just ask you. I know I just gave you a quick introduction, but just introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about your. Let's just start with your story. So let's see, Martin. Do you want to start? I think Jackie's still getting her tech together.
Okay. My name is Martin Boyd. My grandson, his name was Antonio Walker Jr. And on March the 8th, first hot day, he was 15 years old. And the first nice day we had of this season, he was on his way home from playing basketball, Southwest Philly. And while he was on his way home, a group of guys just rolled past in the car looking for some other people, and they just start shooting. And my grandson was shot twice, and he passed away. And the reason why it was so impactful to us is that he was a good kid, vegetarian, number 2 track star in the state of Pennsylvania, hadn't yet stepped foot in a high school, wouldn't hurt a fly. Just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and put our family in the middle of a colossal whirlwind. It was one of those things that we didn't understand, and at the same time, we were wrestling with the fact that God was really in charge of it all. And so, and I like to my position. What it is that I never was upset at God, but I was hurt. I was leaning into grief, and I was inducted into a fraternity of people that I did not want to be a part of. One of the things that has happened as a result of his murder was that we created the Antonio Walker Jr. Foundation. And I know that we would not have did it. We wouldn't have embarked down that road at all. We wouldn't embark down that road at all had it not been for the way he was taken. And the foundation has 2 legs to it. The first leg of it is to reach out to disenfranchised youth and allow them to experience everything his life was cut short of that he cannot experience. And we did our first run 2 weeks ago on his birthday. He actually would have turned 16 on June the 5th. And we ran a 3-mile run for him. And we had the whole celebration. We presented a check to his high school, paid for the uniforms for that year. We're paying for 4 people from his high school, their whole prom experience, and just a kind of way to give back. And the second leg of the foundation is more of a political leg, and how African Americans and families are treated after they face something that is traumatizing. Everything from the way the hospital, I got to the hospital, my whole family outside, they just falling apart. And we never met a medical professional. We never met a grief counselor. They never gave us space to process it. They never told us the next steps of what was going to happen. I never been in a position. I don't know the steps that follow after your child is murdered on the streets. And I'm left there grieving for my for my grandson, still having to be there for my daughter. And so from the way the police handled us to the way the hospitals handled us, that's the second leg of the foundation.
Wow. First of all, I want to, number one, thank you for being on the show along with Jackie. We're going to hear from her in a second. Just want to offer our heartfelt condolences for what your family has been through and what you have experienced. I work in education, so young people are at the center of my heart. So I can't even imagine what you have been going through over the past few months. And thank you for just sharing that part. We're going to get into a little bit more about that treatment and how, you know, trying to navigate after something like that happens. So Jackie, I want to hear a little bit from you, a mom who, you know, has lost her son Antonio to gun violence in the city. Just, you know, you can just pick up from where Martin left off and just share like what your experience has been like.
Well, my experience is my son name is Terrell Davis, Terrell Hakeem Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes, he was murdered September the 1st, 2007. It was a Labor Day weekend. It was quite a few murders that weekend, and I remember getting a call and someone had informed me my son was shot and killed. So I got up, I got dressed, I went to the crime scene, and he was still there. I ran under the yellow tape, and the cop stopped me and asked me, "What am I doing? I can't be under there." And I told him what had happened and the information that I received. And I had said to him, he asked me at that point, but what did my son had on? Thank God that my son had came in the house prior to him getting killed to change his clothes, and I was able to tell them exactly what he had on. And at that point, the cop said 99% that's your son. So I looked at it like it's a high percentage. I should not leave the scene until they get done. And then when I guess it was the coroners, I'm not sure who it was that came, that took the sheet off of his face, and they stood there and they took pictures. So I stayed there until everything was done. They removed his body, and I came home until they called me because they said they had to call me first before I can go to the city morgue. But when I went down to the city morgue, they gave me information that I guess will help me along the way with his with funeral calls, grief counseling, and so forth and so on, and his personal belongings. Um, I was kind of like numb in the beginning, because it took them from the 1st to the 11th before I could bury my son, and it was a long process because of the holiday weekend. But I don't know. It's been a jarring experience, but like in it all, I can say this, right? My son, when he got killed, he had two children. They were 5 and 3 at the time he got killed. My son was 24, and the person who shot him was his friend. So I knew all that. I knew a little bit of information before the detectives told me. The detectives were real helpful. I can say that. I can say that they stayed in touch with me even when it became a cold case. They still stayed in touch with me. When the word on the street said that the guy got caught, I called the detective. He wasn't no longer on the case, but he called the person who was and had them call me. And that's how I knew how to knew when to go to court and what have you. Well, but in the 10 years that we waited for them to apprehend someone, because it was 10 years later when they got the guy and arrested him for the murder. So in those 10 years, there was a lot of ups and downs. I did do grief therapy. I had connected with Mothers in Charge in the beginning. Then I went and got help through EAP through my job, and sought therapy through them. And then later, I got involved with what is anti-violent partnership. It was the grief counseling that they gave you for free
Yeah.
um through the city.
Mm-hmm.
So I got involved with that. But not only did I get involved, I got my grandson involved because he got what I got from him was he was angry, He was lost. He was confused. At one point, he said he wanted to hurt himself. He said it in school, so I didn't take it lightly. I took him to Einstein, and they sent me to where I needed to go to get him some help, and he went to therapy too. So in it all, I was able to raise his son because after my son got killed, they gave DHS contacted me to get his son. His son came to live with me 4 years after his death. I had his son now for over about 14 years because he just turned 17 last week on Wednesday. And it having him didn't make it easy, but it didn't make it hard neither. Because every time I look at my grandson, I see my son because he's a split image. So my story is like I've been helping people ever since my son's death. And I don't know how, but then I do know how. I know God would do things beyond what I can see. I know that he carried me because I was able to finish school at the time that my son got killed. I know that he's carrying me because he didn't allow me to go insane after seeing my son laying on that cold ground in the alleyway with a white sheet over his face. And that's the last image I have of my son. So it was today I can talk about it more than I could talk about it then. It's been 14, it been, I think it'll be 14 years this year. So every so often I would take his son and his daughter to the cemetery where he's buried. We had a memorial maybe 2 years after his death. I participated in something they had where you brung his sneakers to the art museum and they did the footsteps or something like that up there. I told my story for Mothers in Charge a few times. The longer as time, I'm gonna say it this way, as time passed by, um, the easier it becomes to help others. God will put you in position even without your permission to be there for somebody else because I know that my trial is a testimony to help somebody else. Because 2 years after my son got killed, my girlfriend's son got killed, and I was the first person she called. So like it's been a jarring experience for me. 14 years. His son still live with me. And his daughter, I just stay in touch with her regularly. And she graduated high school, she have no children. So I just thank God for that. I thank God that, like she didn't turn to the streets. His son didn't turn to the corners, but the hardest part, right? The hardest part for me was I didn't know when and where I would see the guy that killed my son because I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't have a visual picture of what he looked like. Although I knew his name, I knew he hung with him, I knew they were friends. It was like I guess something happened where it blocked his face where I couldn't see it. But then I'm gonna tell you what happened, right? We was at court and his mom was there. At the end of the trial, when they sentenced him, they asked him, did he have anything to say? He said no. He said no. But his mom said, can I speak? So they let her speak. And she asked me, she gave her condolences. She apologized for her son. And then she asked me, could she hug me? And the judge said no. But I said yes, because I looked at it like it was two loss, not one. I lost my son to, I can't never see him again. And in reality, she lost her son to the penal system. He'd be in jail for the rest of his life, no parole, no nothing, you know. And looking at her condition, she may not never see him neither, you know. So I couldn't deny her the opportunity. So, I don't know. I just rely on my support, people that I talk to on a consistent. His birthday is next month. He would have been, I think, like 38, because he died at 24. He would have been at 38. Yeah, so,
He was an 82 baby.
83.
83. So, okay.
Yeah.
So that's why I keep forgetting I'll be 39 this year. Yeah.
83. Uh-huh.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah.
God. Your story. First of all, I just thank God for the grace that He's given to you, Jackie, as well as Martin. Yeah, for y'all to be able to come on here and talk about this, I think for me it's just commendable. So thank you. Just hearing your experience, I couldn't even imagine. I have 4 brothers, so I can't even imagine what you have went through. And I'm grateful that God has carried you through this situation. I'm sure the darkest time in your life that God has carried you through. And so I have 2 things that I want to ask of both of you, and then we're going to move on in our program. So, Martin, what I'm going to ask of you is, what would you say to a parent who knows that their child is running the street, causing harm and violence to other people, but they are not speaking up about it? What would you say to a parent?
I would say to a parent that knows, we have a responsibility, and the responsibility that we have is we don't have control over our children. I understand that. You cannot tell them what to do. But when you see signs and you're dealing with a teenager, you know that they carry a weapon, and you know these things, then for me, an act of love and an act of extreme kindness is to do something about it. And the way that the world thinks today, you would think that it's almost like they feel like they betraying them. But I'm a person that, listen, if it's a child, if they're related to me, if they're not, if they're in my community, and they pose a danger that I can physically see and sense, then I'm going to report them to the authorities. And I know that goes against the subculture and the norms of the street. I know that goes against it, but those are not the rules of engagement that I live by. So what I would say is, if the child is going through any kind of traumatic or being a present threat and danger and showing those tendencies, to let them go out and not do anything about it is irresponsible. And I'm not saying that they can stop them. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when I see stuff like that, I report it to the proper authorities. You said you were a teacher. They have people that are mandated to report this stuff, and I just don't know, and I can't really get it together in my mind how parents don't believe that they're mandated reporters. Because if I know you're going to go out here, like Jackie was saying, listen, do you understand that the grace is, I'm praying, and this is just my process. I'm not mad at the child who did it. I don't blame the child who did it. I don't blame the family. It is an environment that exists today so desensitized to stuff, and to stay to your question, report them. Don't let, if your child has a gun, you know the gun is illegal. You know that nothing good can come out of it. And I know you're looking at it like betraying them, but sometimes when you love people, the hard thing is the right thing, not the easy road. The hard thing is the thing that we have to do. And I just pray that breaks through some of the cultural norms that seem like they invaded our thinking and won't allow us to get out of this. They mine. I'm gonna protect mine at all costs. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing those words, Martin. We always say when you say something, see something. When you see something, say something. When you see something, say something. I mean, you might love them, but if something ain't right, like that's what love is. Because I'm gonna keep you from hurting somebody else's child and ruining your future. So, Jackie, what I want you to do before we move on to our next guest, you're 14 months out, 14 years out from when you lost your son. Martin and his family is 3 months out, but March, April, May, June, a little 4 months out. What would you say to them at the stage that they are in, at the place that they are in, to help them get through maybe even just the next 6 months?
Well, for for starters, I probably would talk to his daughter first because she's been impacted by the tragedy in a different way than Martin because he's the grandparent. I understand he's impacted too, but what happens is from a mother to a mother who lost their child. I will tell her my experience, but I will also tell her how I got through because I didn't do it by myself. You know, I had a host of people who provided services that could guide me so I wouldn't live in the grief, right? That didn't say that I couldn't feel the grief, that I couldn't get to the other side of the grief because I know I needed to do what's needed. It's okay to cry. I would tell her that. I would be a shoulder if she needed a shoulder to lean on, to just cry and to just listen. You know, because a lot of times we can say the wrong things to people that are grieving, even if I did experience the same thing that she did, because each person experience is different, right? So sometimes it's just good to listen and allow her to verbally say what's needed to be said so she can get through exactly what she is feeling. You know, I have been charged, right, to help others who had experienced the same thing that I experienced. No matter where I come across the person at, I'm always reaching out. I see people daily may put something on Facebook that may be an impact of tragedy. I'm mindful of what I say, but I say, you know, like I understand I'm here if you need to talk. There is help available if you want help. Some people don't want to do therapy, but I found therapy was the thing that I needed to help me get free from some of the things that I was feeling, especially when the guilt told me that I was responsible, when I blamed myself for what happened, you know, because I tried to stop him from going out that night, but he wanted to go. I couldn't hold him back. He was grown. So I needed to allow him. And, you know, like I tried to talk to him because I'm not saying even in his death, he was innocent, right? Because don't nobody need to die, right? So I try to empower him. So one of the things that I would do is hold myself accountable to empower him and his family to get through the grief, you know, because you can get through. You can get through, you know, and it's going to be a process. It's never going to end. It just get lessened. You're going to always have some emotions connected to the person who was killed. You're going to always, you know. So to Martin, I'm here for you and your daughter and your family. I'm a phone call away. All you got to do is call me. I'm there. I will walk with your daughter. I will walk with you, right? Until we can get through to the other side and you can stand by yourself. Thanks.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. Thank you so much, Jackie, just for offering yourself, now as a resource and a support system to Martin and his family. And thank both of you for your bravery of coming on tonight and for sharing. And I really believe that your story, both of your stories, will encourage another family that may be listening tonight who have experienced what you've experienced, and may just give them a little bit of hope that it does get better as time progresses. And so we will continue to pray for both of you. We will be praying for both of your families. And thank you again for being with the Action for Justice Collective tonight. All right, we are going to, wow. I'm usually a stickler for time when we're on these shows, and we try to stay within a time frame. But listen, you're talking about people's lives and people's experiences. Sometimes you just have to be in the moment and allow people to share, and know that this is encouraging somebody who's listening, somebody who may be, engaging in the chat. I believe that the stories that we are hearing tonight, what we'll hear from the therapist tonight, is really going to help us, going to help our community, because our community we need collective healing in our community for all that we are experiencing around gun violence. If you have not shared this conversation, I'm going to ask you to hit the share button, share it with somebody that you know, tell them to tune in and hear these stories. Maybe, like Martin said, listen, intervene, report. Maybe somebody will be convicted who knows that their son is getting ready to go out and do something wrong, knows that their daughter is up to no good, and maybe they will intervene because they saw this broadcast tonight. Also, if you want to connect with the Action for Justice Collective, you can join the mailing list by going to the website, www.afjcollective.org. That's www.afjcollective.org. They are doing a lot of work to help bring solutions to our community. So I think you should join the mailing list, pay attention, stay up to date to what's going on, and make sure that you engage and offer your support to the collective. All right, now we're going to bring on a professional therapist. Dr. Kim from the Ladipo group is going to join us tonight. She's been on with us before, and she's offered some resources around self-care and how to deal with trauma. But tonight she's going to help us understand how do we move on, those who are gun violence survivors, because everybody who experiences gun violence doesn't necessarily die. There are people that have to live with injuries and all type of things. So welcome, Dr. Kim.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you back. So grateful to have you on with us tonight. So we want to talk a little bit about the gun violence, the victim of gun violence and their experience. And so what type of behaviors can be expected from someone who has experienced gun violence?
Sure. So, after someone experiences gun violence, it's typical to have a variety of emotions following the event. They might experience shock or sorrow, numbness, fear, anger, disillusionment, grief, other feelings. They might have trouble sleeping, concentrating, eating, and remembering simple tasks. And that's really because in the aftermath of a violent event, people typically have, really intense feelings. Often some of these feelings can be helplessness, anxiety, and fear. And they may have feelings that there's nothing that they can do that they can protect themselves in the future. One of the things about shootings is that they're unpredictable and uncontrollable. And because gun violence is uncontrollable and unpredictable, this may leave people feeling as though there's nothing they can do to protect themselves in the future. Also people who are present during a shooting, it might really drastically change their outlook on life. Before they might have had the belief that bad things won't happen to me. And then afterwards, it's a feeling like anything could happen at any time. So, all of those feelings can come up. And then if they are present during the shooting, they might have viewed some other form of violence or injury that others might have experienced. And this can bring up feelings of, horror, or really just magnifying the impact of the traumatic event by viewing that. So these are all things that might be typical for someone after they experience a gunshot.
Wow, that's a lot. It sounds like my next question was about PTSD. It sounds like you already started going into that, but could you share a little bit more about post-traumatic stress syndrome and how it can impact people for years and in different spaces? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is a mental illness like any other, and it can affect people who witness violence or experience something very traumatic. And symptoms usually develop because the acute stress associated with the event can really cause problems for them. So there's two things I wanted to just distinguish. There's acute stress disorder, and then there's PTSD. Acute stress disorder is something that might persist for a few weeks or up to a month, but after that, then it's considered PTSD, which is something that's longer and more chronic. And in terms of PTSD, there are some specific symptoms that you can look out for that might be signs that you're experiencing PTSD. And these include recurring nightmares or flashbacks about the event, intrusive thoughts or memories of the shooting that are frequently triggered by things in the environment, avoidance of places or situations that remind the person of the shooting, especially the fear of danger might occur at the same place. And then there's also intense fear and anxiety when hearing loud sounds similar to a gunshot. So kind of that hypervigilance to other sounds that might be similar. Being on the edge or in constant fear or danger, or having trouble sleeping because of feeling overly alert or jumpy at the slightest sound. So all of those things are signs that PTSD might be something that's going on.
And have you noticed that there's a difference in how PTSD plays out between children and adults, or is it basically the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are some differences that sometimes present themselves. In children and youth, when they're exposed to trauma, this can often influence brain development, which can produce lasting impact when it comes to a number of life outcomes. So exposure to gun violence could cause children to have problems with aggression because they lack nonviolent conflict resolution skills, or because, they've seen violence modeled for them. So those are things that could come up. And also, children exposed to violence might also just experience significant stress and struggle to regulate their emotions. So emotion regulation is something that you might see amongst children in particular when it comes to PTSD. Really just not knowing how to identify their emotions and then how to cope with them when they come up. So those are some things that are slightly different.
Wow, that's a lot. And I'm just imagining how many of our young children in our education system have experienced violence and have experienced PTSD, and they're struggling in learning, they're struggling in staying focused. And, some of our teachers are not always equipped to recognize what it is. Students can't always articulate what it is, and they just don't do well in school as a result of something that they've experienced, and it just impacts them for years and years to come. So thank you for sharing about that. So in terms of a gunshot victim, what are some of the things that they could or should do for themselves, both mentally, emotionally, to really care for their mental and emotional health, as well as their physical health after they've experienced such violence?
Sure. So when it comes to mental health, it's really just important for them to monitor their symptoms and to keep track of whether they've been declining over time or intensifying. If they are, that's something that might lead to the development of PTSD. And if that's the case, then early intervention is really key when it comes to that. So, getting linked to professional treatment before PTSD symptoms become worse. Therapy is a great option for people who've experienced gun violence. So I definitely recommend it. And in addition to seeking professional help from a therapist, it's also really crucial to have social support. So, whether it's going to support group meetings or group counseling, those can be really great sources of support as well. Also, just engaging with your community members and really maintaining those relationships that are important to you can be a great help. And then also something I just wanted to address is that so many people after they experience gun violence, you know, and particularly if they're experiencing depression and anxiety on top of PTSD, might turn to alcohol or drugs to, you know, temporarily deal with whatever feelings they're feeling. And while that's very understandable, you know, focusing on health, on connections with others, on, you know, therapy and long-term and short-term solutions is often a better method.
Awesome. So how likely is a gunshot victim to become a perpetrator in the future?
Sure. So there's scant research on this. There's not a ton of research. From some of the research I've found, it seems that is kind of a potential. When someone experiences a gunshot wound, they may be more likely to be someone who participates in a gun-related offense. This specifically came from a study that looked at 2011 through 2016 reports, and found that in 116 people, more than half, 57% of shooting victims had been victims before they were suspected of gun crime by the police. So we do see that this is sometimes something that's possible. Also with children and youth, you know, when they see these violent behaviors happening, sometimes they mimic them. And that can sometimes be the beginning of a cycle of violence. So it is possible when you're exposed to these things that you're more likely to be involved with them later.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. You know, on social media a lot now, I see videos of little 4-year-old boys throwing dice down in a group of older young men, or, you know, picking up the blunt that was laid down in an ashtray, and, you know, people are videotaping and they are laughing. What impact do you think that even like social media and media, those type of things, have on, you know, the young people? Like you just said, when they're exposed to it, they emulate it. What impact, and like, is social media and media, are they bad things? Are, you know, that are they having a negative effect from your opinion on this generation, especially as it relates to violence?
Yeah, I would say that it's really just parents' responsibilities to monitor what kind of media their children are taking in. You know, there's going to be a lot of stuff out there all the time that is not necessarily appropriate for children. And we've seen that viewing some of these things, you know, can be influential. So I'd really recommend, you know, for young children, not having them view violent things on television or playing violent video games. Like, it's definitely better for them to be outside of environments where that's being glorified.
Yeah, I agree. You hit the nail on the head. I think parenting. I think that's so important in our communities. And I think earlier when Martin was talking, and he was talking about the fact that like people don't want to give up their family members because it seems like they don't, you know, they love them and they're supposed to cover them. And I think like a big part of what's going on in our world, not just even in our city, but in our world, because violence is an epidemic across our nation right now. It has a lot to do with parenting. You don't have to be their friend. It's not funny just for you to videotape it for likes, or for people to comment that don't know you, don't know what your real life is like, or doesn't have to deal with your child when they get to school or in other spaces because of the behavior that you promote. I think parenting is very important. And I am not a parent, but I will say it from the perspective of being an aunt. You know, I have nieces and nephews up and down the spectrum. And when my 9-year-old niece is playing a video game and all I hear her talking about is shooting and killing, and I'm immediately turn it off, because that's not what we do here.
Right.
Now, I can't talk about what you do in other spaces, but that's not what we do here. That's not what we promote here. And I really hope that, you know, parents that are listening, you know, you're not going to be the uncool dad or the uncool mom, or, you know, if you tell your kids what's right for them, right, at a young age, if you help steer them in the right direction, because when they are exposed, or you're too busy trying to be their friend, unfortunately, that spirals out of control really, really fast. And so thank you for sharing. I'm just going to give you the space. If there's one last thing that you want to say just to our audience tonight, specifically to those who may have survived gun violence, I'm just going to give you that space to share, one last thing before we move on to our next guest.
Yeah, I suppose I'd just like to say for all of those who've experienced gun violence, you are valuable, you are loved. We appreciate you. We want you to heal, so I really emphasize again the importance of positive mental health for Black people in general. It's so important that we take care of our mental health to be fully well. And sometimes that means, really facing some of the traumas that we've experienced. So if you are someone who feels like they can benefit from therapy, please reach out and find a therapist.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Kim, for being with us tonight. You always have so much wisdom and so much knowledge to share with us, and we are so grateful. Grateful to have an amazing Black therapist share some information with us. And we're going to bring on Sister Sheila tonight. Sister Sheila she also works in the mental health, mental wellness field, and always has a lot of wisdom to share. And so she's going to come on and we're going to focus a little bit on the healing side. After dealing with the trauma, how do we get back to life? How do we try to move forward? And so, Sister Sheila, I want you to explain just from your perspective, and I know we've heard about it a bit tonight, but can you explain the trauma of losing a loved one suddenly to gun violence?
Hi, first and foremost, thank you for having me. I am so happy to be here. And so it's interesting you asked that question. And so I'm glad you framed it around the sudden part, because I believe that Jackie and Martin gave a wonderful explanation, because that's the truth of how that feels. But from a clinical perspective, and one of the things that was mentioned earlier, that gun violence is unpredictable. Now, that's true, but there's another side to that as well. Gun violence in many communities is very common. And so there's also this thing called anticipatory trauma, right? So we think that this thing is going to happen because there's so much of it happening all of the time. So we believe that, and we begin to prepare ourselves in our mind, which is what desensitizes us when something happens, right? But then it doesn't happen until it really happens, and you get that phone call or you see it. Or right now, you don't even have to get a phone call. Your child is in the house playing a video game, and then as a result of that, there's a gunshot through your living room window. And so how to respond to that is what Jackie and Martin talked about. But in terms of the trauma that comes with that, one of the things, Precious, that's really important for us to understand is that when there's gun violence, and there's gun violence trauma, a lot of times when we hear on the media, they talk about numbers. There's been this many shootings, especially if there's a mass shooting. It focuses on numbers. Well, this thing goes beyond numbers. These are lives. These are someone's sons. These are someone's daughters. And what we're not focusing enough on is what the impact is, that gun violence and the trauma that's associated is systemic trauma. Right? It doesn't just impact the survivor. It doesn't just impact the parent, it impacts the first responder. It impacts the police system. It impacts friends, family, community. It infects and affects everything and everyone that comes in contact with it.
You know what? I'm so glad that you said that, and that it's so true. I often think about my family who work in healthcare. And one of my cousins, who's in her early 30s, works at Presbyterian Hospital. And obviously in Philadelphia, Presbyterian Hospital is a hospital that gets most of the gunshot victims, a large quantity of the gunshot victims. I'm always so nervous when she's working in the ER because of what she has to see consistently. She's raising a little Black boy. So I'm glad that you talked about that. And not just that, on Tuesday night, I had a former student who was in a program that I ran for 4 years, was shot in the head standing at a bus stop in West Philadelphia. And I haven't been able to sleep. It's been bothering me, just, thinking about his single father who raised him and his brother who was in my program and his sister, and I haven't seen him in years, but it's that reverberating effect, that impact that goes beyond just the individual's family, just the neighbors on the block, and it really has a ripple effect too. And I often wonder, does the perpetrators think about that, right? Like how it impacts so many people. And again, like you said, it's systemic trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It's systemic trauma that we're all experiencing. So can we shift a little bit? We've been talking about, for the most part, like families and parents who have experienced, the loss of a child through gun violence. But what about when children experience losing their parents? And Jackie hit on it just a little bit, but what are some of those behaviors of children who have experienced losing a parent to gun violence?
That's a very good question. And I wanted to, you described, when you were describing the student or this young man that you knew, it brought to mind, the secondary trauma, right? You weren't there, but the repeated thing around it. So the behaviors of young people can show up. And when I think about young people, because I don't deal directly with children under 6 years old, but I think about the emotional behavior. So there's anger. Right? It first comes out in this place of anger. And then there is also, it shows up in the form of academic problems, right? So it manifests itself differently because, again, they don't know how to communicate what is going on with them. Again, remember, a lot of our young people, unfortunately, Precious, are in environments where gun violence is common for them. Right. So we don't know how to put a label to it. We don't know how to say, this is what's happening to me. There's, of course, in younger children, there's the bedwetting. And then there's depression. Right. We don't know, all of a sudden. And as parents and loved ones in village, we have to pay attention to how the behaviors have shifted. If you know that your young person is falling behind, they used to be an all, A and B student, and all of a sudden their grades are dropping, ask questions. Right. I heard you say earlier, you see something, say something. That takes place internally as well. Also, there's anxiety. There's also this place, need for revenge. Your dad's in jail. So I'm going to get this person that did this. And so a lot of times this is how the illegal guns come up. Right. They also have a tendency to avoid situations out of fear that it will happen to them. And what does that look like, right? Anticipatory trauma. What does that look like? Then there's, unfortunately, this place where there's self-medication, right? You'll see substance use, alcohol, drugs, right? And so one of the things, Precious, that I always say to individuals, we say, well, why is he acting like that? Or why is she acting like that? That's not the question. The trauma question is, what happened? It's a what question. It's not a why question. There's a reason, even for the perpetrator. Even for the perpetrator, there is a reason that the perpetrator feels the need to go out. One, the no value for life, anger. Again, in communities, the highest risk of gun violence are in communities where there is high poverty, where there's a lack of resources, a lack of housing, a lack of educational resources. So when you play all those things into effect, and if you get a perpetrator into a therapist's office, I promise you, you'll be able to trace back to the what happened to them that led them, and they've now become someone who is harming someone else.
Wow, that is so true. That is absolutely so true. They become that person. Even just that last statement that you just made, that they become that person that is harming someone else. Because we always say that hurt people hurt people. When you don't know how to process through that hurt, you don't know how to get to the place of healing. Hurt people hurt people. And of course, when somebody is murdered, everybody is, you want to blame somebody. And a lot of times people want revenge. But I want you to talk a little bit about what are some of the therapeutic resources that exist to help families, individuals get through this. And then if a family has experienced violence, do you suggest that they maybe see a therapist together? Do you suggest that it's an individual process? From your professional experience, what are your thoughts around that?
Thank you. Powerful question. So, that's a place I live and sit and love, right? I absolutely, and not just because I'm a therapist, I'm a mom. I'm an auntie. I'm a lot of things. And one of the things that was mentioned earlier, so there is a place where any of us will experience, after a traumatic experience, a level of emotions. And what we need to distinguish, which Kimberly did earlier, is that the PTSD symptoms last longer. They're more intense. And the earlier you get intervention and treatment, the more positive chance you have of not producing a long-term mental health issue. Because I have the thing I say, unaddressed issues have babies, right? And so what we need to do, and I believe it's both and. I believe it's individually, and I believe it's also family. Again, this is a systemic issue. So it's not just impacting the individual, it's also impacting the family. And so one of the things around healing that's very, very important, and it's for the individual and the family, because sometimes family members, if it's a survivor and they've experienced being shot, the family does not know how to deal with it. They don't know why that individual is angry, why that person is acting the way that they are acting to them. So one of the things that's significant is being able to teach families, communities, neighbors, the survivor, because not everyone dies from gunshots, is providing in therapy a safe, non-judgmental, empowering space for them to be able to talk about it. You know, there's been research that's been done that said if you get 20 gunshot survivors, gun violence survivors in a room, 18 of them are more than willing to talk to you about their experience and tell them. So the most powerful part of the therapeutic experience is what happened? Talk to me about that. Providing a safe space for that. Not shutting it out. It's not normal. Letting them know, no, it's not normal for someone to harm you. You know, regardless of what the person did, you know, it's not okay for someone to try to take your life. It's not okay that your father is now in prison because he took someone's life, because then there's the other side of that, Precious, right? So there's, how does it impact young people? How does it impact the family that's left behind? That perpetrator is now in prison. So now, in an ideal situation, that mother of his children is now left to raise those children alone. Those children are now angry because now they're in a single parent home. Now this child is traumatized again because now this child is visiting their loved one, because I don't want to just say it's fathers, because mothers are also in jail for the same thing as well. So now this child is going back and forth to prison to visit their parent or not. So I'm somebody who definitely recommends therapy. There is resources, of course. So the Ladipo group is on tonight. Soul Transformation. The city has many, I will put them in the chat. Families of murdered victims. Jackie mentioned the anti-violence partners. You know, the mothers in charge. Trauma, Precious, reshapes our brain. It permanently changes the wiring in our brain. What healthy social supports and therapy and other resources provide is a rewiring to allow us to be able to adapt and live in such a way that the experience doesn't define who we are, but yet informs who we are. So it is possible to live with a space like that, because you are not what happened to you.
I'm gonna need you to say that again. You know, Sister Sheila, sometimes you just drop these bombs on us and they real heavy. But I'm gonna need you to run that back for me real quick. You said that the trauma doesn't what?
The trauma does not define who you are. It informs a part of what it's a part of your story.
Part of your story.
You know, because I know, Precious, you know, if you wake up Black in America, that in itself tells us that's a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
And when we look at certain things, we can look at what the media does to this. So, you know, Trayvon Martin, there was a lot of focus on it being a racial issue. And yes, it was. But there's also a place to say, let's talk about the gun violence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's not minimize that. And his parents have turned it around and began to let their anger be done in a constructive way and be able to do, as Martin said, be able to make a difference.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think it's always commendable. It's awesome when you're able to turn your pain into power. And that's what we saw both from Martin, both from Jackie, the stories that we heard tonight. I think that's really, really powerful. We've seen it, like you said, with Trayvon Martin's family has done the same as well. And I think, you know, Wow, just so much of what you said, like it informs who you are. And but what you, at the core of what you just said in the last 60 seconds was about, like, let's get to the center of the issue, which is gun violence, right? Like let's just deal with the gun violence. And I know this isn't a political show tonight, but just thinking about, states like Texas that just made it legal for the rabbit and the hunter to have a gun, right? And not have to necessarily be licensed and cleared and all of that to carry a gun in their state. And the thing about it, when you think about our country, so many people are, they hold their right to firearms so close that it really, it creates an imbalance when you start to deal with cities like Philadelphia, where so many people have firearms legally and illegally. And then we see this epidemic of violence that arises because so many people are fighting for the rights. And I'm not saying it's a wrong thing necessarily to have a firearm when you have it for the right reason, but so many people are fighting for that the gun violence issue has gotten out of control. It's gotten out of control in our country. And I think a lot of times, we know in Philly, we know it's systemic, not just racism, poverty. We know, we're the 5th largest, poorest city in the country. We know what happens when you put a lot of people in concentrated areas. We know that, but there's some other issues behind that people have to be willing to address so that we could, begin to progress and just move away from some of like this constant trauma that we are experiencing in our community. So I'm going to bring a couple more people on. We're going to leave you on, Sister Sheila. We're going to leave you on, and I'm going to bring a couple more people on to join the conversation. So happy. I think I've been moderating for a couple of months now, and I've never actually had the opportunity to interview one of the founders of the Action for Justice Collective. So he's going to be joining us tonight. Michael Brown is with us. The people that I'm bringing on, they are leaders of grassroots organizations. And listen, they are in Philadelphia making moves. They're not just talking about it, but they are people that are about it. They're making moves in the city, trying to bring healing and even hope to our communities. We have Joseph Budd from the Germantown Men Who Care, who's going to be joining us. And then Pastor Harrison from New Journey Christian Center is with us tonight. And so thank you so much for joining us. And I'm just going to digress and ask you all to, Mike, I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about, so we might have to have y'all mute if you're not talking. And then when it's time for you to talk, you can unmute yourself. But I want you to share a little bit about, number one, why this subject is close to your heart, and what are some of the things that AFJ Collective is doing to address this issue in our city.
Good evening. Thank you, Precious. This issue is close to my heart for so many reasons. Growing up in Nicetown area, Avenue area, losing friends for, senseless reasons, just seeing I had a situation where I just left a friend around right around Christmas time. He just got finished going Christmas shopping with his wife and was going to go and was headed home. They was not living together at the time. I think he was his fiance, but it wasn't living together at the time. And he went home, and we had just left him. And I may have been 13 at the time. And lo and behold, some trouble that went on around the corner that he wasn't even a part of, wasn't even there when the trouble had happened. And the guys came back and just shot everybody who was standing there. Shot at everybody, but the one person that was not there was the one person that got hit. And so that's at that age, that's as early as it hit me. And then as I was sharing earlier, Pastor Harrison, I had another friend who, basically was hanging out after work and, was at a pool hall. Same thing. He went to go leave. I'm done. I'm ready. The guy he had beat was not happy with that situation, followed him outside and shot him. And there's too many stories to tell I watch the news every night as, you know, my duty. I don't want to watch all 3 hours, but as my duty of being an activist, being out here, I was a youth advocate for almost 13 years. It's heartbreaking. I just keep watching the pain in our community and the survivors, the ones who do survive, the families who are left here. And it's just watching our community continue to hurt and continue to go through this pain. It fuels me to say, I won't complain about it unless it's something that I can feel like I can do to help it. And I want to be a part of the solution, the collective. We are committed to being a part of the solution, and that's why we're here this evening. We are here for anything that comes against our community or that takes away from our community. But this gun violence thing is just something that is so self-inflicted that we feel we have to educate us. We have to educate. We have to love each other. We have to support each other. We have to work together. And, you know, it's victims all over the place. And, you know, and we need accountability. So that's the beginning. That's the start of it. And we just want to continue to work to end this. We can't continue like this.
Yeah, this is true. Thank you, Mike. Joe, I'm going to ask you the same question. You know, why is this subject dear to your heart, and what are some of the things that you're doing with the Germantown Men Who Care to address this issue?
Well, thank you for having me on. I grew up in Germantown, and I was actually a part of the problem at one time. We were out there in the streets. We were doing some of the things that carrying guns and drugs and all of those things. We were doing those things, and we saw, well, let me say this, we were able to get out of that life, and we saw the hurt that it did to our community. So the way I actually got involved, one of our guys who I grew up with that, you know, we used to run with, he gave me a call after he came home from jail. And he called me and he said, you know, let's get together. And from that call, we end up cleaning up lots in Germantown. And it just transformed after being in the community and seeing what's happening in the community, that we naturally started working in the schools with the children, because we saw some things that, you know, we weren't comfortable with. And the brother Martin said something really powerful: cultural norms that are affecting our communities, that people feel like the things they're doing are okay. You know, if you shoot me, I shoot you. That's it. You know, you disrespect me, I'm gonna kill you. These are some of the norms that's going on in our communities. And we believe that being on the streets, old heads that can bring some wisdom to these situations, maybe we can pull some of these young guys out of that. We're actually in 3 schools now. Actually, we're going to be in our 4th, but Emlyn, Roosevelt, and Martin Luther King, with our mentoring and real talk programs, talking to the young guys. And one of the things I'll say is, you know, you have to build relationships. And we think that's so important, to build relationships with these young guys in order to get them to open up. We talk about them opening up, talking about their issues. I know Sister Sheila said, you get 20 of them in a room and 18 people are willing to talk about their issues. Yeah, let's get them in the room, though. You know, one of the cultural norms in our community is, you know, we don't talk about things like that. We don't talk about, you know, our mental health. We don't talk about, you know, our son who is carrying a gun. We don't talk about that. We know that he has guns in the house. You know, there's a lot of things going on that we have to address. And Sheila hit it again, anticipatory trauma. You know, when I talk to the young guys, a lot of them are saying, you know, I may not make it out of this thing. You know, they believe that they're going to be shot. In one of our real talks at Martin Luther King, we had 12 young men ages 15 to 17. And I asked them the question. We started talking about guns. I asked them the question, how many of you guys carry guns? Out of 12 young men, 7 of them said they carry guns on a regular basis. So the question became, why do you carry a gun? Because I don't want anybody to get me. So they're fearful, right? So fear causes them to do that. And they said they'd rather be caught with it than be caught without it. So this is permeating throughout our community. How do we change that mindset that our young men and some young ladies have, that I'm going to shoot you and kill you to resolve an issue? That's one of the reasons we're in the schools. We're in elementary schools first, because we feel like maybe we can get them before they pick up that gun. Maybe we can direct their path differently in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, give them some more resources to help them not go that way. You always hear about that test that they give to determine how many prisons to build, right? Why can't we use that same test to determine how many resources we need to put in our schools for our children to direct them in a different path? So those are some of the things that we're saying. If the district's not going to do it, we're going to bring the resources into our children that they'll be able to make better choices.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Joe. And the question that you just asked, the question is, you know why we can't use that same test, because of capitalism and because of, those things are intentional. But I think you guys are onto something, because when you talk about synergy, there's strength in unity. And when we get together, there's nothing that they can do with us. So I am grateful to hear from you leaders who are stepping up to the plate and saying that we're not going to live with the status quo and just keep letting this be perpetuated in our communities. Pastor Rob Harrison, I'm going to ask you, I asked everyone else, why is this subject of gun violence dear to your heart? And what are some of the strategies that you have implemented with the New Journey Christian Center to really try to address some of these issues?
Well, number one, thank you, Precious. You've done a phenomenal job. And I must say
Thank you.
Sister Sheila, I haven't seen her in a while, and it's good to see a real strong sister in the fight, and the fight is to save lives. It is real good to see a strong sister still here and not giving up. But one thing for me personally, I would say over almost 20 years ago. If you remember back in 1999, 2000, I was unfortunately had to not witness, but be a part of my little nephew. He was one of 5 children who were forced to jump into the Schuylkill River by gun. See, gun violence comes in different ways. He was forced to jump into the Schuylkill River, get off of their bicycles, and jump into the Schuylkill River by gunpoint. And they all 5 drowned. They lived in West Philadelphia, and it was something years ago, and thankfully, but this was over 20 years ago. So I've been that victim because I was a big cousin for years. I had a nephew who was very close to me who was pistol whipped by a gun and died. So gun violence happens rapidly in many ways. I've been a part of Men United for Better Philadelphia, which was an organization we started with Police Commissioner Sylvester Johnson. And I'm saying this for a reason, that it doesn't have a religion to it.
Absolutely.
It does not have a religion to it. And I am one of the most advocate people to pursue and push that we need to take violence and address it for what it is. It's evil.
Yeah.
And from that point, I am still perplexed as to why our leaders are not looking at it from that perspective. Because we still have some moms and some grandmoms and some dads who are in the church and know that their children still have guns in their homes.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who are praying for God to take this away from my child or get this away from my child. and I'm being honest, I'm very transparent, so maybe I'm on the wrong show, but they're the ones who are praying, and they know where everything is at.
Yeah.
They know where the drugs are. They know where the drugs are put, and they know where they're being hid. But one of the most phenomenal things where I put my attention into is working with Brother Mike and Brother Joe, is because these brothers, and having the experience of working with Sister Sheila, is because these people are transparent about what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we hide behind religion. Instead of telling the police where the guns are, we'll pray to God.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of making it aware that we have a problem with our children, we'll pray to God. And for me, it's not to slight God, but it's more of identifying the transparency of how important it is for us to come together. My nephew was forced to get off a bicycle and jump in the water with 5 other young 12, 13, and 11-year-old children and died because they couldn't swim.
Wow.
That was still a part of gun violence. So we have to be mindful of what it is and what we're looking at. And I also look at it from the perspective of when we look at our trauma and the traumatization that happens, we know for a fact, everybody on here knows, it's not just the victims, but it's the perpetrator. All families are affected. And for us as clergy, we have to understand that it's mentally, emotionally, physically, sociology, but it's also spiritually. But we can't just deal with the spiritual. We have to know the resources that are out there that are valid resources. Brother Joe helped me with my nephew when my nephew did not want to hear from me.
Yeah, that's
but
good.
I had to send them to him.
That's good.
And he was so happy the fact that he did continue on to go to the next grade of high school this year when he wanted to give up. But he wasn't listening to me.
Yeah.
And for me, he had an option. He was forced to pick up a gun or pick up a book. And Joe put that in his spirit. It wasn't me. And we have to sometimes come out of ourselves. So I'm going to leave it. I'm a preacher and I'm not charging.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that context with us. So we know that it's near and dear to all of your hearts because of your own experience. Joe, I'm going to go off book a little bit. I got a question for you. You shared a little bit about, you said I was them. I was them. I was in the streets. I was, fooling around with the drugs and violence and those type of things. And when you said that, this question came to mind. I think a lot of times when these young people are out here, we're constantly like, what's going through their minds that you can pick up a gun, and I'm not saying you've ever shot anybody, pick up a gun and just shoot another young person and then go home at night and sleep, or whether it is drugs infesting the community. And I want you to share, I know you've been transformed and you're on the other side, but you have insight that maybe some other people may not have. Can you share a little bit? Is it peer pressure? Is it wanting to look like, they're the boss in front of everybody, that they're fearless, even though a lot of times that gun means that you are afraid? I want you to share from your perspective. What is it? Why are some of our young people, why do you think some of our young people are doing the things that they're doing, just from your own experience? You're muted.
I'm sorry. I actually was shot myself in 1979 on my front steps in Germantown by a gentleman. It was over an argument, and he came back with a gun and shot me on the front steps. Was I carrying a gun? I had been carrying guns well before that. He just caught me without mine that day. But we carry them because of fear and because of the things you're doing. You're doing something you're not supposed to be doing. But I just want to say this. I think it's a little different now. It is different because these guys are carrying guns and they may not even be in a drug game or doing anything like that. It's just they have a beef on social media with somebody, and somebody said something, and then you heard that such and such is a shooter. Now you got to carry a gun to protect yourself, or you go get him before he gets you. And I think they built up this idea, and I have to get back to, because I hadn't really heard that cultural norms thing. It is something that has grown in our community, that you can just go and shoot somebody. When you see the brazenness of some of these shooters now, I saw in New York when a guy was chasing someone, and he was shooting at him, and he knocked down the two little girls that he was chasing, and the guy was still shooting at him with the two little girls there in broad daylight. That didn't happen when we were coming up. You had a certain amount of respect for elders and different people in the community. You would shoot going after the person you wanted. That was it. But now it is whoever, wherever. If you're in your car with your family, we don't care. If you're on the street with 20, 30 people around, we don't care. We're going to get you. We're going to shoot at you. So I think it's a different mindset, and it goes back to what is okay and what isn't okay. And I think a lot of it, just me, I think a lot of it is entitlement. These young people feel like, they have to be in control of everything, and they're entitled to do whatever they want to do. And somebody talked about parenting, but we got to realize a lot of parents don't know how to raise kids in this era. You want to talk about the crack epidemic of those that were coming up during the crack epidemic that were crack babies now have children. They have no clue on being responsible. How are they going to be responsible? They were never taught. So that's where I believe the village comes in, and that is us as the community to step in and help the parents and the children. And that is the model of Men Who Care, is that if we can get to the children, we can get to the parents, we can bring resources to the whole family and assist in changing that cultural norm that's going on in our communities.
That's good. Thank you.
Abnormal.
Abnormal. Yeah, that is so true. I agree. It has to be holistic. It has to be holistic. It has to be the child, the parent. So we're talking about strategies here. I want to make sure we bring in Lisa Torre. We have our youth activist on with us tonight, and I want her to be a part of this conversation because she is living and seeing this happen every single day. I'm sure there are people that she knows that has been lost to gun violence, and I'll let her tell her own story and experience in just a second, because we don't want to just talk about feelings and what our experiences have been. We want to talk about some strategies. What are some of the things, like even how can organizations work together? And I want to lay this premise, working in the education system in Philly, there's a lot of programs. There's a lot of nonprofit organizations, but our education system is still one of the worst in the country. And so how can programs, organizations, grassroots organizations, whatever, how can programs, number one, effectively synergize and partner? And not just focused on my mission versus your mission, but like focusing on the problem. And any one of you can take that. How can organizations, go ahead, Mike.
I love that question, because I think what we have here right now is an answer to that. These gentlemen that I share this screen with, and lady, because Lisa Torre is also a part of the Action for Justice Collective as one of our young people. These gentlemen, these everybody that's on the screen right now, we're working, collaborating right now, our efforts to address these issues in the community. We've been out, Germantown Men Who Care, Pastor Rob over at New Journey, as well as the collective. We've been out, and I believe 2 or 3 Mondays in a row where we've been working together. It's still working our individual groups. We still have this platform, Germantown Men Who Care, has been feeding and working in the schools and the community for years. 10th year anniversary. They're like our big brothers, showing us the way to go. No big us, you know what I mean? We sit under their tutelage. Pastor Rob has opened his doors for us to help with programming. We're working together and showing this. We're working with the Northwest Coalition under State Representative Steve Kinsey, and which is partnerships and collaborations from businesses and like-minded people, stakeholders coming together to say, hey, we want to work together in this community. Sister Sheila, the Depot Group, this is this is exactly the example of how we can stop this, by working together, offering our platforms, offering our resources, and bringing them together. The one thing that we're very careful not to do, we all know we all have each other, we all have lanes that we work well together in. The Germantown Men Who Care, they early education and early intervention is key. They work very well in the schools. They've been doing it for years. They're very effective. We're coming on. My passion was these kids working in athletics for 17 years and coaching and everything. My passion is these middle-aged 8th grade to 18-year-olds, and making sure that they have resources that they need, making sure that there's accountability, and that there's resources that and I like I think Joe talked about building relationships, being consistent, being an advocate, say, well, Mr. Mike, how does it work? How would you able to work with so many kids? Show up, mean what you say, keep your word.
That's good.
And that you'd be surprised what they want to talk. They want to talk, but they need to know that they can depend on you. People will talk about the F word or the F word. You know the worst F word you can ever call me? A fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say that you're going to do something and you don't do it, you are a fraud, and they will call you that to your face.
Yes, they will.
And if you talk it and don't walk it. And I always say I'm a great talker. I could talk forever, but that walk.
No, Mike. No, I'm joking. Go ahead.
Talk. No, not me. but the walk.
The walk.
If that walk don't match the talk, you won't get anywhere. So I think as we're showing how to, one of the questions earlier was from Ms. Smith. She asked, well, what can we do? This.
Yeah.
Let's work together. Let's not talk about working together. Let's literally, Pastor Harrison, come on, Mike, I'm ready to go. Let's get it. He is ready to jump in. His energy is amazing. It's not about the talk. Let's start getting this done. So that's how we're showing as an example on how 3 different organizations, 4 or 5 different organizations can all come together and work our area and literally change our community.
And I think that's awesome, Mike. I definitely joke with you about the talking piece, but let me tell y'all, I can testify to the fact that he is walking. Like every week, I'm getting a different flyer about something that, when I say the Action for Justice Collective hit the ground running. They hit the ground running. They said, we are not going to sit here and watch our community burn. They hit the ground running. And so, Mike, I definitely commend you on walking the walk. And one of the things that you said, I am a director, so I have mentors and coaches that come up under me. And one thing I tell them every year when they come to work for my org is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right? You can have all the degrees in the world, you can have all the lingo, all the language, you could be the coolest, but until they really know how much you care, nothing that you say, none of that matters. And so you're absolutely right. I'm gonna pivot real quick to Lisa Tor because I want to hear from her. We got a few more minutes and then we're gonna wrap up. But Lisa Tor, I want to hear from you because I want to hear, number one, from your perspective, right? Like how does the gun violence crisis impact you in the city of Philadelphia as a young person in the city of Philadelphia? And then the second part to that question is, what do you see as the impetus behind the gun violence, or, what's the reason from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, like the whole gun violence crisis, I think it impacts me. I think what impacts me the most is knowing that my peers, people who I grew up with, having the same background as me, having the same sense of humor, personality, going to the same school, coming from the same background. I think it hurts the most knowing that it could be me. And I mean, everybody living in Philly, I feel like, has faced some type of gun violence, whether it's like a cousin or like a neighbor or a friend. I think sometimes I'm actually extremely emotional and grateful knowing that being from where I'm from, like, I literally could have been a statistic or I could have been dead. And it's like, it could have been like, if my friend or if my cousin or if my neighbor had one more opportunity of like to life, or if they had a better education, or if they had one more opportunity from somebody, I think that like really hurts me, because I understand that like being in the position that they're in is like, it's not always them. It's not always the fact that they wanted to be a victim of gun violence, or they wanted to be in the streets, or they wanted to live that lifestyle. It's like literally, from my perspective, I feel like it's a combination of everything. Like, it's not just one factor that causes gun violence. I think for me, the main one is poverty. Yeah, I think, and it's like, I feel like gun violence is a tricky topic, because it's like, it's your gun violence, there's a system, there's the school to prison pipeline, there's mental health.
Yeah.
I think that's all the root of the issue. Like, I feel like everything is more so being caused from retaliation. Like, this is from my perspective. I think retaliation and just like mental health. Like, everyone around me, at one point I felt like we're zombies, and like we were all just so numb to the fact of, if someone died around us, it's just like, well, like, of course there's emotions after the fact, but in that moment it's just like everyone is so numb, everyone is so like on drugs, because they don't want to face the reality of the fact. And it's like, it's not even the fact that they choose to be a part of gun violence, but it's the fact that mentally they have no choice, because it's like, if somebody killed my folks, it's like, and then also add in the whole pride factor. It's like, if somebody killed your folks, like, what you going to do? Like, how does that look to other people? So I think definitely retaliation, and like this generation is definitely one of the causes. I seen somebody say like drugs. I mean, drugs is definitely a factor, but I feel like, I'm gonna be honest,
It's not like it was in the late 80s and the 90s. It's not, before it was about the corner, right? And like, who's standing on my corner, and you're trying to sell on my block. But I think somebody was saying earlier, it might have been Joe or somebody else was speaking earlier, like, drugs don't even have to be a factor anymore.
I feel like in like the climate we are, like, politically, when it comes to like legalization of like marijuana and stuff like that, you would think since weed is becoming legal that gun violence will go down, but that just shows to me like that's not the case. I feel like even when it comes to like youth, most young people who are victims to gun violence aren't selling drugs or aren't in the streets. It just has to do with association, pretty much.
Yeah, I think that's true. A lot of it has to do with association. And that's unfortunate, because there's a lot of the victims are innocent. They had nothing to do with nothing. They weren't a part of the beef. They weren't a part of the fight. Z, do you think that social media plays a part in gun violence, or just violence, period?
I'm going to be honest. I feel like that's a scapegoat for me. Like, I feel like it's easy to put it on, oh, social media plays a huge part, because I feel like it doesn't play a huge part, because people have been getting killed before social media.
Mm-hmm.
Social media definitely does play with the psyche, and it's like, of course, the more you feed to yourself, the more you're going to start to believe like what the media tells you. But I think that also like kind of plays on like the stereotypes of like black men and
Mm-hmm.
what they show us, because honestly that's not the reality of the majority of black
Mm-hmm.
in America. But I can say for music it is kind of different. I feel like like trap music or whatever, like I feel like that, to be honest, like I know a lot of people who are really not like that, but they'll listen to trap music and it's like all of a sudden they want to shoot somebody, or like
Yeah.
like depression starts to set in because of the music that they're listening to. So I think definitely that plays a part into it.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I think when I think from the social media perspective, I have one more question that's going to involve the, for you, Z, that's going to involve the other leaders that is on this platform. When I think about social media, I think, yeah, part of it is what is, you know, kind of glorified in the media. I think the other part is you have these Facebook groups, these Philly Facebook groups and these Instagram pages where people are beefing on these pages, and then that actualizes in the streets. And I don't know if it happens with the young people, but I've definitely seen some stuff on some of these really popular Instagram pages, and I don't even get in those Facebook groups in the city where it's like one group against another, and it, you know, it causes a lot of drama, I think, that sometimes spills over outside of social media. Z, if you had an opportunity, you have some leaders on this call, you are a part of the collective, and these leaders are connected to political figures. If you had to make a plea on behalf of your generation to those who are working to be solutionists, what would that plea be?
Plea to the youth or plea to these people in here?
Plea to the leaders.
So I would definitely, I would definitely say my plea on behalf of youth is I feel like oftentimes, like when it comes to like young people being given the opportunity to like speak in spaces like this, I feel like a lot of people who need to be on platforms or who need to speak out are overlooked. And I'll say like people who are more likely, because everyone in Philly pretty much faces gun violence, like I was just saying, but like I feel like people who feel like they don't really have a way and who are really stuck into it, I feel like there should be an opportunity for them to be more welcomed into grassroots organizations and different communities to speak out, because I feel like they know best. Like,
that's good, Z. That's good. That's something I haven't even really thought about. Think about, Joe, the young men that you just talked about at King. What would it look like if one of them, and some of them might not be willing to because of fear, right? But like, what if a brave space was created for them outside of even just their group of friends or the mentorship conversations you guys are having, for them to be able to tell their own story and talk about what a solution could look like?
They would actually be happy about that. When we were at Martin Luther King, we had a couple of young men that were willing to step up and speak up. We had one young gentleman, I'll tell his story. His name was Shane, and everyone was saying he was that guy in school, always walked around with a hoodie, and we got him in the Real Talk. He opened up. We did a suit up program at Martin Luther King, and we all dressed in suits and walked around. Enon was a part of that too. Deacon Sherrod Davis and Men Who Care, and we walked around the school. They said he came in that school with his shoulders back and his head high, and Shane's grades went up. He just graduated this year. We gave him a $500 scholarship, but he was willing to talk anywhere we needed him to talk. And then there was another gentleman, Jamil, who had a case the whole time that we were at the Real Talk. He was willing to step up and talk. We lost contact with him, trying to reach out to him to find out how his case went. He had an armed robbery case, but he opened up in the Real Talk sessions, and we were able to send somebody for his first court case. So they have a lot to say. We need to get them in these spaces so that they can say it. But I just want to say this before we get off this call. Mike touched on it a lot about collaboration. We're talking about multi-levels in addressing this gun violence in the schools, when they're on the corners, and when they get cases, get ready to go to jail, we have to deal with that. And when they come home from jail, how do we deal with all of those facets? And that is what we're doing with Pastor Rob, Mike, and Men Who Care. And I just want to say this. I don't know how many people is on this call. We have to be consistent and visible in our community to make a difference. And the only way to do that, we need people to volunteer and be a part of the solution. time, talent, or treasure. Some way you got to help, because we are in emergency status in our communities with this gun violence, up 38% from last year, which was almost a record year, 262 murders in the community already. We need to get out and get involved. So if there's people on this call that's not involved somewhere, find the organization that's doing the work, get involved with them, see how you can help them.
Yeah, that's good. Get involved, right? Like, stop being on the couch and just talking about that's a shame. Find a way to get involved. You just said we need volunteers. I think that is so important. People need to step up, and don't just wait until it's your child. I know for me, I've been doing a prayer every week because I think we have different graces. I'm working in education, combating generational cycles of poverty from that perspective, but also been doing a prayer called Not on My Watch every week, just interceding for the violence in the city of Philadelphia. And let me tell you something, it's difficult to get people to even get on the prayer sometimes and just pray, literally, because, it doesn't matter until it's your house. It doesn't matter until it's your family. And that's something that is concerning. Listen, we have just a few more minutes. I'm going to ask if you have any questions to drop it in the chat. We've got Martin back with us. Jackie may be joining us back. I want to ask Pastor Rob. We know that in our communities, there is a huge abyss or separation between law enforcement and the community. And there are some law enforcement that's embedded into the community, but we know our young people don't trust the cops. We know that there are just major separation issues. How can organizations work with law enforcement agencies to build trust in the community? Because some of you're gaining trust from the young people, but how can you work with those law enforcement agencies as well to get the community to start to trust them so that everybody can start to swim in the same direction?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Precious, because it starts with modeling. We have to model what trust looks like. We have to model the fact that we're not fighting against each other, that we're fighting against a demonic spirit called violence. We have to model that. And I think from certain perspectives, we have to be careful. As in leadership, we always tell our children, be careful what you say out your mouth. We, as leaders, got to be careful what we say out our mouth, because sometimes that's all our youth want to hear, is that one word. That one word that helps them, and they'll grab it, they'll grasp it, and they'll eat it. Well, you said blank the police. How come I can't say it? That's not what we should be doing. We need to be modeling. I mean, I've been being totally honest. Out of all of the violence in the city, there were two people who were killed by police this year. And both of them were killed because the police was shooting at them because they were shooting at somebody else. Joe just said that there were over 300 and some people killed. But we're still talking about the diversion. Let's accept what we need to do as a people, and as leaders, we need to start setting an example about what it looks like to model and trust. Relationship is a process. It is a total process. And I just want to say this, when I'm going to say this, Sister Z's not on, but we have to learn how to listen to these youth. I'm serious.
That's so
I'm
true.
not the kind of person that walks around and acts like I know what these youth are going through. The school I went to is not the same school that they went to, whether it was 5 years or 10 years ago. So I can't tell my children, oh, yeah, that ain't what that school looked like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, not even last year. Also, we need to include our youth on the development of these programs that we get.
I agree.
From the door.
I so concur. I can't echo that any more than what you just said, because you know what, Pastor Rob, one of the things that I say is don't ask for feedback unless you're prepared to do something about it. And then if you want buy-in, the people that gave you the feedback, bring them in so that they can help you do something about it.
Well,
And I think
one
a
thing
lot
I say real quick, I say, don't step on my toes unless I got on shoes. Because these young kids will step on your toes. They
yeah,
will make you say ouch because they're going to be transparent. They need our help.
yeah, they do. They do. And they want it.
Yeah.
They want it, right? They want our help, right? They might not be able to say it in front of their friends, but they want our helps. I get text messages, inboxes. I'm not a teacher. I work for a college access and success program. So I'm helping young kids get to college and get their degree. But I've worked in elementary schools. I've worked in high schools. They will listen. Our young people are so amazing. They deserve to live. They're so amazing.
That's true.
And if we would stop judging them, stop having preconceived notions, stop talking for them, stop creating programs and throwing money at stuff that isn't necessarily the answer, I think that we would definitely start to see a difference. And so we have so many people that you guys have just shared in the midst. Sister Sheila, was you get ready to say something?
I just wanted to add something to actually thank you, Z, so very much for being, the voice of reason amongst us old people here today. I really, I was listening with the big ear. And because one of the things, and Pastor Rob said it's so good to see you, is that, listen, I'm a therapist. But I'm also an anger management specialist. And one of the things, and I heard Joe say this about, you asked the question, well, why are they doing this? Why is this happening? And if you think about the incident that you described, Precious, on the news with the gentleman shooting over these two babies, right? That is anger, right? It is anger driven. Yes, I can clinically dazzle you with a whole bunch of but that is anger. And what is the anger coming from? A threat, real or perceived threat. So they're responding to something that they think is a threat to them, whether it's like Z said, retaliation, you're going to come after me first, I'm going to shoot you before you shoot me. That's that whole thing with that. The other thing that, and I really, really appreciate what she was saying, and Pastor Robin, this is what we have a tendency to do. And I don't care where you are. It can be church, it can be therapists, it can be at home. We give people what we think they need instead of giving people what they need. And how do we find out what they need? Relationships.
Yes,
Relationships. Michael said it, consistency. Listen, I want to know that when you say that you're coming to my school to have real talk, that you're really going to show up every time you say you're going to show up. Because you know what? I had a father who didn't show up. And if you're just going to do what he did, you might as well not even come. But it's a buy-in with young people. I have clients who I deal with anger management, and they tell me that it's about hatred. It's because somebody didn't keep their word. It's because nobody listened to the young person. We're not listening to them. If you listen to any young person, they say, can you hear me out? They preface their statements with, but listen, it's about relationships, and putting on the big ear. We can dazzle them with legislation. We can give them money. We can tell them a lot of programming. But if I'm not building relationships, which is what therapy is about, I build relationships. I listen to stuff nobody else will listen to. Not just because I get paid for it, because I volunteer in some spaces, but listening to what we have to say. So I thank you, Z, because that's the reality. Do we have anybody listening? Michael is listening, and Pastor Rob is listening, and Joe is listening, and Martin is listening, and Jackie is listening. But let's take that and multiply that time. Who else is just listening and building relationships? They're angry because no one thinks they're valuable. I tell this to clients all the time before they leave me. You matter. You matter. The women I mentor, you're enough. We're so busy telling young people what they're not doing that we're not telling them what they're doing right. And they will listen to us if we just make ourselves available. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
Sister Sheila always stirring us. Go ahead, Z.
Oh, I was going to say that kind of goes into the conversation of like when it comes to like city officials, because I know I've seen on the news like all of the city officials like going to the mayor and asking them for money. And it's always interesting for me because it's like we're getting millions of dollars, but the money is never allocated properly to youth. Because this is not the first, second, or third time that we've had millions of dollars for youth. And it's like every single time it's giving to programs that aren't really needed in the cities. Like, I have yet to see the mayor or any state reps, anything set up a town hall and say, like, youth, what do you guys need or want? Like, what's the priority? And it's like, I think what's important, and also grassroots, it's like grassroots orgs. We have millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars that can be allocated to actual need, but it's always just thrown around. And I think that's something like that could be fixed within like grassroots orgs, city officials. And I'm gonna be honest, like, if any like adults want to advocate for anything, I feel like it needs to be less of, I'm sorry guys, it needs to be less of like gun drives and like more of like actual work, because I feel like in the city it's not really an urgency when it comes to gun violence.
Yeah,
it's more of like,
Go ahead, Z. I'm just amening you.
Oh. I feel like there needs to be more of like actual like urgency to, because obviously gun violence isn't going to be fixed next year or in 10 years, or, well, let me not speak, but in 5 years. But I think there's a lot that can be done when it comes to like preventative maintenance for the next generation.
That's good. And Z, I'm gonna take it a step further. We can encourage, because the black dollar is powerful.
Yeah.
If we can encourage people to, if we can invest in ourselves, because the government ain't gonna do it for us. We've seen that. They're not gonna do it for us. We know that money doesn't always go where it needs to go. Our schools had mold in it for the past several years that just really got exposed by the pandemic.
Yeah.
If they cared about us, that wouldn't be a thing. And I'm gonna say this, and then I'm gonna let you all just give your social media handles, how people can connect with you. I was at a program today, and I had to ride through Gladwin to get to the program. It was out in on Villanova Road. And riding through Gladwin, I'm saying to my mother, who's in the car with me, while I'm looking at the houses and how amazing they are, at the same time, I'm like, Mom, I'm so sad. I said, this is the true story of the haves and the have-not. Because as long as they could live there and their houses on the hill, and they're multi-million-dollar homes. I'm not talking about $800,000 homes. I'm talking about multi-million-dollar homes. And some of them come and work here in the city. They make their money and they go back home. Their children go to Lower Marion and Upper Marion School. And it's nothing wrong with, wanting your child to have a nice education. But at the same time, our kids are suffering as a result of that. We have to teach our own people how to invest. Stop investing in LVMH, right? The Louis Vuitton. Riches, and I like luxury, but I'm saying we got to refocus. Richest man in the world. We are running up King of Prussia, not because we live up there, but because that's where we're spending our money. If we reinvest our dollars into our children, into our communities, I think we'll begin to see the shift and the change. Versus, we've been waiting on a savior for a long time, and I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm talking about the government and officials. And I feel like, that's why I appreciate the organizations that are on here tonight, because y'all are saying, I'm not waiting any longer. We're not waiting for anybody else. You're taking a stand. So thank you so much. Listen, I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds to say one final thing to the audience. And when you're doing that, I'm going to ask you to give your handles. How can people connect to you if you have a scholarship, organization, whatever it is that you want the audience to know about? Because maybe they didn't watch tonight, but they might watch the replay. I want you to share that information. And then we went way over the, what we used, but I think this was a great conversation. And so, Mike, I'm gonna start with you.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess my statement is this. We have all this on. We've covered, COVID. We've covered gun violence. I want to know if I bring on people who can come on and talk about economic empowerment, who can talk about understanding the power of your credit, entrepreneurship, talking about education and valuing your education. Will we tune in for that? Will our community, because all of those principles are the things that we're going to need to come out of this impoverished mindset. Those are solutions. You want to know what the solution for gun violence is, giving people hope and letting them know that there's another way to a means, letting them know that there's other paths that you can take. If I bring on career specialists, will we watch? That's what I want to know. And if we can do that, then we can start to change things from a long-term perspective. So I would love to bring those tools. We have that available. We at the Action for Justice Collective, we want to teach the community to use the community to heal the community. It's in our community. It's just that will the rest of our community, will we use these resources? The Action for Justice Collective, we need members. We need people. We need volunteers. If you are tired of complaining, I will tell you this, and I'm going to let it go. I don't want to talk to you about what's happening unless you're doing something to stop it. I don't have any word. I don't want to hear how bad it is unless you vote. I don't want to hear how terrible the school is unless you go up to parent-teacher night. And I don't want to hear about the community unless you're giving back and you're helping and you're making things better. If you're doing those things, I'm all day. If you want to help, you can come with the Action for Justice Collective. As you can see, our tags are on the bottom of the screen. You can get with Germantown Men Who Care. You can get with Pastor Harrison. You can get with so many groups out there. But let's stop complaining about what's happening in our community. The solution is within ourselves, and we can heal the community within the community.
Amen. Thank you so much, Mike, for sharing that. Martin, I'm going to go to you. And thank you for hanging around tonight.
Listen, this was awesome. I had a great time, great information. I'm so happy that Z joined us because when we did the foundation for my grandson, we looked around and people that were frontline in the trauma, in the whole trauma space, myself, my daughter, her friends, people that knew him. And I'm so glad God gave us the wisdom to seek out the voices of youth. And he just really let us know that we are passionate, but we do not have a key. And if we do not bring them to the table, then we know better than politicians that decide in some room what a community needs that they're not connected to. So I'm super grateful for Z. I want to say that I was listening to Mike, and something about empowering our people, and something about, we in this space where we in the Black Lives Matter space, and God knows I know Black Lives Matter, but a part of me, it seems like I'm trying to make the politicians or somebody get in touch with the reality that Black Lives Matter. But Black Lives Matter, whether the people agree with it or not, they just matter. My grandson was killed. His life mattered. Jackie's son was killed. His life mattered. So when I listened to Mike, I thought, and my mind, where I went to in my mind was equality. Now, I know that my life matters. I don't need you to tell me that it matters, but I don't want it to be validated in the words that it matters. I want to be treated equally, and I want our community to be treated equally. And I'm interested, and I'm fully engaged in helping the community in the space that God has given me to help. And I'm being stretched because I'm in another space helping the community and getting around the youth. And I'm realizing that if I don't have youth connected to my hip, whispering in my ear, then I'm doing something out of my own spirit. And Pastor was talking about, listen, stuff is not the same. The rules of engagement has changed. And if I don't bring people along with me, I think I missed the opportunity. And I'm going to be praying and be really prayerful about Mike, you introducing us to another conversation where we could begin to empower ourselves. And even with that, the youth has to be involved. because we, the adults on this line, y'all all appear to be outside of Precious old enough to remember when I was growing up, when I went outside to the store, I was able to go to avenues and buy from black-owned businesses, go to a black-owned supermarket, and when we attempt to challenge and break down the system that exists now, I just believe that the youth have a better ear to the street and they understand what's going on. And I'm going to be prayerful and I'm going to be engaged to walk alongside of you, Mike, in whatever endeavor or however I can fit in. You have my time, my talent, and my treasure to help as best as I can. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Martin. Joe, I'm going to go to you. Were you on mute, Joe?
We're Men Who Care of Germantown. You can reach us at menwhocareofgermantown.org, or you can go on my Facebook page, Joseph Budd Jr., and reach us there. We are doing the work in the community. Every Saturday, we're giving out food at Morton and Tappahocken, not just to give out food. We're engaging the community. We're engaging families. We're getting information so that we can get resources to our community. We also have a summer program coming up at Roosevelt Middle School, K through 8 school. And this was a way of engaging our youth prior to them going back in person and engaging the family. So if anyone wants to volunteer for that program, and this is through an ARCS program where several organizations came together to get the school and get that space. So our main mission is engaging. And like I said earlier, consistency and being visible is what builds relationships. And I think that is what we need to do as a community. And the young lady, I think her name is Z, said something real important, that we're not treating this like an emergency that it is. To come from a young person, she's right on point with that. And you can't stress that enough. People got to get out of their comfort zone and say, what can I do to get involved? Because this is an emergency that we're in right now. And if we don't start doing something, we're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. You're right. It's an emergency. Jackie, I'm going to go to you next.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Well, I don't have much to say, but I just want to thank y'all for inviting me to come out and speak. And I also want to say that I'm available to participate at any capacity that I'm needed. I'm always open and willing to give back, to help, to give back to the community, outside of my community. I give back every day that I show up for work, because I have people who come to the place that I work at that suffer from PTSD and substance abuse. So my goal is to be an instrument for God and to provide services to the young, the old, the middle. You know, like when I first started in the place of business where I work, I started out with the youth, and I was listening to Sister Sheila when she said that sometimes we have to listen, and I found that to be the key factor when it comes to the young people. They need to be heard. They do have a voice, and I want to thank Z as well for speaking up for the youth. Um, I do go into the schools, the prison system, and Mike, I just thank you for inviting me. I'm willing to come back even for the other platforms that you are about to do. I have experience other than just with the murder of my son. So I can be reached on Facebook at Jackie Goddess So Awesome Williams, on Instagram J Williams 61315. I don't have no other media that I do. So, you know, or you can reach me by email. My first name, Jacqueline _26404 @msn.com. Thanks for inviting.
Awesome. Jackie, you're amazing. And I just want you to know that you have encouraged and inspired me tonight. So thank you so much for being with us. Pastor Rob, then I'm going to throw it to Sister Sheila. I'm giving y'all 30 seconds. And then I'm going to let Z wrap us up tonight. This has, again, been an amazing conversation with the Action for Justice Collective. Thank you so much to the Ladipo Group and to Soul Transformation and everybody who was here tonight for this conversation. So, Pastor Rob, I'm going to kick it to you. You pass it to Sister Sheila. And Sister Sheila, you have the honors of passing it to Z. And we're going to tell the people good night.
But let me first of all say, I'm glad you put me before Sister Sheila, because I can't do after her. But and Z, thank God for you, sis. I really do. You know, your transparency, your honesty is why we're here. I will say that we're really going out. Y'all remember the date on July the 10th from 11 to 4. We're having a pop-up shop that is highlighting the small businesses and independent businesses in our Northwest community. That's at 1001 Shelton Avenue, 1001 East Shelton Avenue. We're having a pop-up shop from 11 to 4. You can go into our website, which is www.newjourneycc.com, not org, com. newjourneycc.com. If you got a small business, you can register. And if you just want to come out, we're going to have a little carnival thing that occupy the kids' time while you go around. But we are highlighting our services and our businesses in the community. So that's on July the 10th from 11 to 4. And I just want to say one thing, something I've always said, and Mike and Joe know this is one of my pet peeves of saying it. If we take the guns out of these children's hands, what are we going to replace it with? And that's where we need to be at. If we tell them, give me the gun, what are you going to put in their hand and replace it? And that's where our challenge needs to be. But again, don't forget our pop-up shop. It's on our website. If you don't see it, it'll be on there. But it's at 1001 East Shelton Avenue. And we're highlighting small businesses and services that are provided for the Northwest community on July the 10th at 11 to 4. Thank you very much. Now, I introduce you to the one and only Sister Sheila.
Amen. Amen. He played too much. So listen, I am Sheila, as you know, therapist, founder, anger management specialist, speaker, and coach of Soul Transformation. I can be reached. I have several handles, but I think the most convenient would be the website, www.soultransformationtherapy.co. Also can be reached on Psychology Today. Just put in Soul Transformation and you will find my entire profile there as well. I want to thank you for inviting me to participate in a powerful, life-changing, life-saving conversation. I want to also remind us that love is a verb. Love is about doing. And if we're going to have young people listen to us, let's start with the young people that are immediately around us. That is our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors. And lastly, I will say this because the Lord has been rocking out with me and getting me in a whole bunch of trouble, but the time for playing church is over. Right? It is time for that to be over. It is time for us to step up, to do something different. So, Michael, I am, in your back pocket, on call for action. And you know that I'm always there to support from a therapeutic perspective, provide transforming experiences. The mission of Soul Transformation is to change lives. I wake up every single day asking the Lord, how can I transform lives on purpose, with purpose, for purpose? And with that, I turn it over to Baby Z.
Z, unmute yourself.
Oh. My last thing that I'll say, I'll just say that, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the panel. And I'm just excited I got to engage in the conversation with everyone. And I'm just excited to get to know that everyone is doing amazing work in Philly for the youth. And I love conversations like this, but I just hope after this call that everyone just takes initiative to do something, at least to make change within like their own community, and that there will also that there will be solutions and not just conversations like this, because I feel like this is good, but I think there needs to be more done other than just having educational conversations. And yeah, that's it.
All right, Z. Thank you so much. And I think everybody on this call has committed to put their hands to the plow to do whatever they can do in the side of the vineyard that they have been called to. I hope those who have been watching and listening tonight are doing the same. Hope this has stirred you and encouraged you to get up off the couch and make a move in your community. God bless you all. We love you all, and we will see you all at the next town hall.